Hey everyone, Keith McGinnis here with KCDC Designs, and don't forget to click that subscribe button. I really appreciate your support. It really helps. We're going to cover several things on Carrara Marble, Calacatta Marble, how to create veins using spray paint, how to create veins using epoxy, the undertones. That was one of them there. That's creating a couple different styles of veins, and this one is a colorful vein of getting a lot of different colors in there that can really add a lot and make your piece look authentic. So let's get rolling.
Now the reason I'm using white on the surfaces is I think it's going to help show the veins a little bit better than if I were using darker colors. We'll do a little black and a little bit of smoke gray. So the reason I've got the camera a little further away, because I want you to see how far away I'm doing this. So I'm very lightly, I'm going to dust. Yep, I don't want the black. We're going to go with charcoal. That's more than what I wanted on there. So I'm going to get a little bit of, and you can barely see that I even have any on the surface. You probably can't even, doesn't even look like I have any on the surface, but I've already got a little bit more than what I want. So, but I want you to see the difference and see what this does. So now, let's get the camera up a little bit closer. So you can see a little bit of the spray paint here, but the rest of it is very lightly dusted on. So what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to take my Bondo spreader very lightly, and all I'm going to do is just skim over the top. So let's do a couple like that. And then let's meld the rest of it.
Now, if I were doing this on a larger surface, I might use the magic trowel, but as you can see, that's about the same size as my sample board. So I'm using a Bondo spreader.
And I'm going to put just a little bit more in there because I want to have one straight line to kind of see how that looks. So let's do that with our charcoal right across there. And again, you can see how very lightly that I did that. And then we're just going to leave that alone. Okay. So we'll let that soften up. Now what I'm going to do is I'll move over to the other one that I've got here. I'm going to take my charcoal, then I'm going to take my smoke gray, and I'm going to get some epoxy on my gloved hand. Okay, so what I did was I got some epoxy on my hand. Now I'm going to take some of my charcoal, just put a couple drips in there, take just a little bit of spray paint on my gloved hand. Oh, that's a little bit more than what I wanted. And now I can take one finger, two fingers, and we can just run some veins through here.
Now this is really a great technique, and maybe you already have your design and your pattern already created. But you're going to put a little epoxy on your gloved hand, put just a little bit of spray paint on there, and maybe put in some accent veins. Maybe not as heavy as what I'm putting in here.
If I mention having to be patient a couple times, or like every time when I'm putting together these videos, but on this one, when I run these types of veins, I am going to take the heat gun and I'm going to soften those up a little bit.
So the heat gun is just speeding up the process. Otherwise, those would soften up and start to meld on their own. But like I said, the heat gun, we're going to speed the process up a little bit.
That looks really good the way it is. So we've learned one way with the wet gloved hand to run some accents in there. And keep in mind, when you've got a large countertop surface, just putting a couple of those little areas in there and then softening those up can really add a lot to your design. And it doesn't have to be with black. What happens if we do that with, I've got an almond color. Should we see what that would look like?
Again, just showing you some different ways to add some character to your undertones.
Oh, that is kind of pretty. And then we're going to soften that up a little bit. But I have some of this pearl mist. I'm going to try a little bit of that while I still have some epoxy on my hand. Oh, that pearl is pretty. Oh, that is pretty. Whew. All right. So, wet gloved hand, a little bit of spray paint on your fingers. Put that in where you want it, and either give it some time to kind of move around and do its own thing, or you can take the heat gun to it and soften that up and move that around a little bit.
Now, because the epoxy is still very fluid and I am using 3 ounces per square foot, again, that would soften up on its own. But you can see here with a little bit more of a close-up, number one, look how that almond really added a lot more character to the marbling of that, but it's a very authentic looking marbling.
Okay, now let's go back over to the other one again. That one over there we're going to let cool off a little bit. See how that is softened up? And I just barely fogged that with spray paint. So I'm going to come around here.
Now again, the marbling on this one is a little bit different technique. This is where I fog very, very lightly and just kind of ran over it with the Bondo spreader. Kind of skip troweling, if you will, very lightly across the top. But it added a different element, but some really cool marbling as well.
Yes! We've got our epoxy that's been sitting in there for about 15 minutes. A couple different ways you can do this. You can get a Ziploc baggie and you can put your resin in that Ziploc baggie and barely snip off the bottom corner of that to drizzle your veins on there. I didn't quite mix up enough to do that, so I'm just going to let it drizzle off my stick. So let's put a vein out that way, and then let's branch that off like that. Okay, now you can see that's fairly tight, and it's staying fairly tight. So now let's take our black Rust-Oleum gloss spray paint and let's run another one. I can still tell that's still very fluid. Oh goodness. Oh, I got heavy there. So much for a nice tight vein, huh? And then we'll branch this one off that way. Okay, now that epoxy vein, obviously that's tighter, right? Are we going to leave that alone, or are we going to try to move that around, manipulate that a little bit, or do you like it the way it is? I don't like this little gap right in here, so I'm just going to close that up. But the spray paint, I can take the heat gun to that one right away, and I'll be able to open that up, close it, I can move it around.
You'll notice a big difference between using the heat gun on a spray paint vein and heat gun on an epoxy vein.
Now, already you can see, because the epoxy is still fluid, you can see where we're getting some shadowing from the epoxy vein. Now again, you might like that the way it is, and you can spritz it with some isopropyl alcohol and it's going to change the look of that, but it's going to continue to move still for, you know, a good 15-30 minutes yet. And how's that going to change? So I won't take any heat to that at this. You know what, let's take some heat right here to this area that I just touched. See how that doesn't quite move as much? It gives a shadowing look.
Because it's epoxy on epoxy, the two of them are wanting to meld together.
So that looks pretty good. I still personally like the black vein. To me, I think it looks more authentic. It looks more natural.
So let's get a little closer look. That's the spray paint vein. One of the things I like about the spray paint fracture lines and veins is because it doesn't spread out like epoxy does. It's going to stay in place. And even when you manipulate that with your heat gun back and forth, it's going to stay in place. Whereas the epoxy vein that you're looking at right there, it's going to kind of meld in with the other epoxy and kind of give that shadow look.
We'll come back to that and see what that looks like. So let's go back to the other one again. Instead of doing a fracture vein, let's do this one a little bit differently. First, I'm going to start off without using, that is so pretty. I don't want to do anything with that. Wow, that is gorgeous. Ooh, dang. Man, I don't want to do anything with that.
So let's do it. I'm going to be using spray paints. I'm going to use almond, champagne bronze, aged bronze, oil rubbed bronze, and black and white. Seems like a lot of colors, but that's what I'm doing in here, is spraying it on my stick and just running those sticks through to create the vein the way I want it, and then we'll go from there.
So as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm just getting some colors layered in, right?
I also like using some of the color on the stick just to make some floater veins.
And black really adds a lot of definition to your veins. And you don't have to run whatever color you're running, doesn't have to go all the way through. I mean, you can just have it in some spots.
So I'm going to continue adding in the colors and adding those little floater veins that I was talking about. Just kind of some accent veins off to the side, and then we'll open all that up.
All right, last color I'm going to put in there is white. And white you have to be really careful with because it will give you the appearance that it's getting away from you. But in the end, when you move it around with the heat gun, it just reacts a lot differently than some of the other colors.
Once I get the heat gun on there, you'll see what I mean by how that white reacts a lot differently.
All right, so now we're going to get the heat gun on there. We're going to move that around, manipulate that a little bit. I could leave that exactly the way it is, but now we're going to do some painting with air.
So when using the heat gun to open that up, a couple things to be careful of is make sure you don't stay on one area too long. You don't want to get it too hot. You don't want to burn it. All we're looking to do is just kind of open those veins up a little.
So I just used the stir stick just to get those colors in there. And then just use the heat gun just a little bit to move those around. And the little accent veins, they make just that subtle little bit of difference. Okay, now let's go back over to the other one and let's see what that looks like since it's been sitting for a little bit. And you can see the difference between the two veins. So that one there, of course, is the epoxy vein. And you can see how that alcohol made that little bit of difference. But I don't know that I like the alcohol in the undertones. So now let's start and take a look at the spray paint vein. See how that stayed very, very tight? So if you remember on this one, it was just a very, very light fogging of spray paint. You can always add more, you just can't take it away. But very, very lightly fogging with spray paint and then going over it with the Bondo spreader caused that really, really cool marbling. And remember, I used smoke gray and charcoal, so I did not use black. And I'm glad I didn't. I did in one small area and then I changed, but I like the charcoal and the smoke gray a lot better for undertones. And then the fracture veins that are in there. And again, if you want to add any other colors in there, any accent colors, highlight colors, you can certainly throw those in there as well. I mean, whether it be some blue, some green, some red, you can put anything in there. But I really, really like that fracture vein. But I really like the look of that fracture vein. I think that looks really cool. And then that's been sitting for just a few minutes. Can't get the glare out of that one either.
These types of veins are honestly my favorite. And you can use I used 6 different colors in there, and you wouldn't know it, but it gives us such an authentic natural stone look. But by far my favorite type of vein that you can put along with any type of design. For a small sample board, it being 12 by 16, it really looks cool. I can definitely see that on a large countertop surface. And there wouldn't be a lot of manipulation involved. I'm really glad that I put that almond color in there along with, remember I used the almond and then also I used the
funky looking spray cap of Rust-Oleum of the Pearl Mist. But you can see that in person, you can see that, and it really looks cool. So let's do this. Remember I talked about the fast dry spray paints, which are the silver and then also the copper. So let's put a couple copper highlights in here. Now again, this is the fast dry metallic finish, and this is bright coat copper. Now watch when I put this in here how this copper is going to remain on top. Where should we put it? Let's add a little bit right in here. Now once it's in there, you can't do anything else with it. See how I tried to continue to move it? It's fast dry and it remains on the surface, and so that's exactly where it's going to stay. See if I can get the glare in there just right, and you might be able to see how that copper shines because that remains on the surface. Now we'll do the same thing with the silver, and I'll show you how that has the same reaction. Okay, now this one is the Rust-Oleum Specialty Metallic Bright Reflective Finish, and this is the metallic silver. So we'll do that.
And you want to do these types of accents late in the pour when the epoxy is not so fluid, so it doesn't tear those veins you're putting in.
See that silver? So that silver is going to remain on the surface. It doesn't show up as bright in some directions, but it shows it pretty bright in some others. There's the copper, there's the silver. Now again, if I spritz that with alcohol, it's not going to have any effect on those two. Actually, it may have a negative effect. So again, if I'm going to put in the copper or the silver metallics, that's the last thing I'm going to do is put those in. Because if there's any other manipulating that I want to do, I'm going to wait.
So I guess one of the points I wanted to get across during this video is, number one, there's many different ways that you can create some really cool undertones. And you saw the two different ways that I created the undertones. Then the veining, there's many different ways to create the veining, and I showed a couple different ways to create your Carrara Marble veining, your Calacatta Marble veining, and then also how to create fracture veins using spray paint, using epoxy, and then going with more of a colorful vein, which is what I've got on that board there.
Really turned out cool. I'm going to grab the camera one more time and we'll do a flyover, and then I'm going to end this session. So we have the undertones with the wet gloved hand with spray paint, and then we have the multicolored vein, and you can see, remember how I moved that around with the heat gun, and it doesn't take much to move that around, but boy does it give you a really, really cool look. And then there is the copper accent. There's the silver accent. And remember when I was running my stick through that main vein, and whatever paint that I picked up on my stick, I just added in those little accents off to the sides. Look how much of a difference that made, just putting in a few of those accents. So it really looks pretty cool. All right, on to this one. And really turned out nice. The only thing I would probably do different is I probably would not add the alcohol. But again, there's the spray paint vein, which you can see has really held its shape and held its form. And then coming back to the epoxy vein, where that one has some shadowing. Again, that's not a bad look. It just depends on the look that you're after. And then you can see what the alcohol did. Again, I think I would have gone without the alcohol. I think I like the piece kind of the way it turned out. So I think I showed maybe several different techniques. Again, those can be used with any colors in any form, in any way, but just kind of gives you an idea of what works for me. And hope you learned something. I hope you learned something, and I hope this can be of help. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you've got any other ideas, leave those in the comments also. Anything that works for you, let me know. So that's our discussion today on veins. Once again, Keith McGinnis here with KCDC Designs. You guys have a good day. We'll catch you later.
Please don't forget to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. We will see you on the next video.